Thanks to Saul and the entire BIF team. I can't tell you how humbling it is to be here and to be surrounded by so many incredible minds and so many incredible innovators. It is really, truly an honor. And I struggled a lot with what I could talk about, what story I could tell to a group of people who are masters at innovation and who have done masterful jobs creating things that nobody thought was possible. And so as I reflected back and thought, well, what could I add? What value could I bring and what story could I tell? I was reminded of some of the messages that you see on the screen. Now, the hardest part about putting this slide together was that there were hundreds of messages to choose from. Thousands of messages. For the past year, 2 or 3, every morning when I would wake up, my wife and I would get our iPads and we'd pull up Facebook and Twitter and other platforms, and this is what we saw. Now, the reason I picked these two is because most of you will know that these 2 tweets come from very highly regarded journalists. These aren't just everyday people. These are people who have influence. These are people who speak to large audiences. And at the same time, the frustrating part of seeing these types of messages from these types of individuals was that ultimately they were, excuse my language, bastardizing a brand and a community because of an anger and a hatred for an individual. And so what I want to talk about today is community. And as if these types of messages weren't bad enough, we had people, even within our own sector, saying things like you see on the screen. It will devastate them. They will not be able to survive. And the reality is, what these individuals didn't understand at the time of their remarks was that there is a community that has been built and is continually being developed around the concept of survivorship. How ironic that this community is in the business of survivorship, and yet we've had to now apply some of those same lessons to ourselves. So as I prepared for today, I thought, well, this story for myself goes way, way back. And I thought it would be helpful to sort of give you some of that context, because this community has been building and brewing for a long, long time. So my story goes back to a place called Columbia, Maryland. How many people have heard of Columbia, Maryland? Okay, more than normal. Columbia was the first planned community in the United States of America. The first planned city, built by a visionary innovator named Jim Rouse. Jim Rouse purchased thousands of acres of land between Baltimore and Washington 50 years ago and said, I'm going to build a city based on the values of diversity and inclusion and service, built on the value of community. So what does that mean? Columbia was a place that my parents picked as a place to raise a family. They moved there 41 years ago. And they moved there because of these values. And some of those values, let me give you a few examples. Columbia is a place where every neighborhood has single-family homes, apartments, and other types of housing options for the community. Columbia is a place that has interfaith centers that on Friday and Saturday serve as synagogues and on Sunday serve as churches, where people worship literally in the same room. Columbia is a place that tries to bring together people of various backgrounds with a belief that communities can solve problems, that communities can provide great solutions to improve the quality of life for everyone in that community. And at the time, I don't think I realized how great of a place this was. But when I reflect on the meaning of community and the value that we place on community, it all traces back to my upbringing in Columbia. Now, this is a picture of me as a teenager, and this is what people in Columbia do. They actually play soccer, which is so bizarre, given that the popularity of the sport wasn't what it was years ago in this country. But if you drove through the streets of Columbia in the late 80s, this is what you would see. You'd see kids outside playing soccer and being a part of the community. And I had the privilege of playing for an amazing high school soccer coach named Bill Stera, and he taught us so many things about discipline. And he taught us so many things about being a part of a community. And this idea of walk when you can and run when you must is a philosophy that he ingrained in us as high school athletes, because he believed that when you were walking, you were serving yourself. You were catching your breath. You were being sort of loyal to your own health and well-being. But when you were running to support the team. You were running to support others that were on the field with you, part of your community. He also had a lot of interesting ways of teaching discipline. This picture is so symbolic of that, because in order to try out for the soccer team, you had to juggle the soccer ball 150 times. And what Bill Stera would say after you accomplished that, and after you were able to actually step onto the field to try out, was that does not mean you're a good soccer player. He said, in fact, it means nothing other than you spent hours and hours and hours and hours by yourself with the soccer ball, training to be able to accomplish that. And it was this amazing, vibrant community of people who sacrificed themselves for the betterment of the entire community. Now, I grew up in this idyllic place, and as a result, had the opportunity to attend Brown University, just up the hill. Yeah, and it's great to be back. And it was such an honor to arrive at Brown with this background focused on community building. And so I invite you now to just join me in closing your eyes for just a minute. And I want you to think about the person in your life closest to you who has been diagnosed with cancer. I want you to think about what it was like when you found out. I want you to think about what it was like when they called you and you heard their voice. Think about how overwhelming and how shocked and how maddening and how frustrating. I want you to open your eyes. What you just thought about is what my family and I experienced in 1996. I was healthy as can be. I was a student athlete at an unbelievable academic institution, and I had everything at my fingertips. And yet, even though we had an educated family, insurance, access to great clinical care, there was something missing. And it took me weeks to figure out what it was. Here, I seemingly had everything, and yet there was this big void. Something was missing. I was frustrated, I was upset, I was confused, I was asking, why me? How could this happen? And what was missing was a community. As a kid, I had a community. As an athlete, I had a community. At Brown, I had a community. But what I couldn't find was other people who had been down a similar path and had the same experience, who could yield wisdom and provide a roadmap for what I could anticipate. And that community has now been created, and it's been created organically. And people ask all the time, well, what is the real value of this yellow wristband or the wristbands that you see on people's wrists for any number of causes and organizations? And the value to us as a community has nothing to do with the money that these wristbands generate. It's the dialogue. It's the conversation. If you would have told me in August of 1996, Doug, you're going to wear something on your wrist outwardly showing that you either have had cancer or are part of this community, I would have said, no way. There's no way I would do that. And now it's created connections that we never dreamt possible. In fact, and this may be controversial, but this was one of the first forms of social media. We think about social media now from a technology perspective. But this connected people in ways that they never could have been connected previously. And there are so many stories of those types of connections. The other thing that this did was it democratized philanthropy. Philanthropy and social change and social action used to be things that you could do when you had money and time. This was $1. It allowed everybody to be a part of a community so much larger than themselves. And that's a powerful, powerful thing. And at the time of my diagnosis, I couldn't figure out what was missing. But it was the idea that there needed to be a larger community of people who cared about a common cause. Now, as you all thought about the individuals close to you who are a part of that community, now we realize that there are not only 28 million cancer survivors in the world, but that number is growing exponentially due to the phenomenal advances in biomedical research and in new therapies and in prevention and early detection. And so that community is going to continue to grow significantly in the coming years. And communities grow and thrive based on their ability to participate and to influence the outcome of the process that they're participating in. Communities are two-way dialogues. And communities are full of stories. They're full of people. People like Iram, who happens to live in Austin, Texas, single father, diagnosed with a brain tumor, given 6 months to live 4 years ago. People like Hiram, who started to become a serious runner after his diagnosis and practical death sentence that he was given. As a matter of fact, Hiram recently became the first individual in the United States to run and win a marathon pushing his daughter. Unbelievable. Every time I see him, I'm like, are you kidding me? Come on, you're making everybody look bad. But people like Aram are vibrant parts of this community because he gets to express his own desires, his own goals, and live life to the fullest. People like Lori, who's battled cancer 4 times. Lori had surgery on her lung last week, and the smile you see on the screen is on her face 24 hours a day. This woman epitomizes what it's like to live life to the fullest. And this community has given her an opportunity to share her story, to pursue her dreams, and to be a part of something bigger than any one of us. And so when people ask, how can you possibly survive what you've been through? How do you respond to people who question the credibility or the opportunity? It's pretty simple. And it traces all the way back to Columbia, Maryland, as strange as that may sound. But when I was a kid, growing up in this planned community where people valued working together, people valued sourcing ideas, people valued finding solutions, and people encouraged one another to solve problems rather than talk about problems. Our parents taught us the difference between a community and a crowd. And it's so timely because we hear all the time about crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. And as much as I love those concepts, I'll never forget the definition that my parents taught us. And it was really simple. And it was that in a crowd, people actually push and they shove and they elbow. And they try to get ahead of the person next to them. And in a community, people look each other in the eye and they smile and they shake hands and they may even hug. And they realize that at the end of the day, none of us get the opportunity to move forward unless we all move forward together. So I imagine a time and a place where all of us in this community come together to solve the problems that are plaguing the world. And that's why I'm so optimistic about the future. Thank you so very much.